everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about the horror show at Extreme Rules, where the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Yeah, weirdly, the story of this show was, well, the various weird things that happened. There was a lot of strange booking, not even just in the matches that were overtly weird or cinematic or horrific, but in some of the normal matches as well. In fact, you could say that the match in which the rules were most properly adhered to was actually the bloody eye for an eye match. So it was a very strange show. Generally, the quality of the wrestling itself, everyone on the roster seemed to put in a pretty decent performance at the very least. Everyone seemed to really bring their A game, but the booking of the show was weird, man. Why was it weird? Well, let's talk about it. Let's go through everything that happened at the horror show at Extreme Rules and find out what on earth, what everything was. Just one pre-show match to talk about, which was Kevin Owens taking on Murphy. They had a good match. It was probably better than the general level we expect of pre-show matches. Both guys really tried their best, and even though it wasn't given that long, I think it was still a pretty good contest. After a bit of a back and forth, Owens picked up the victory with the stunner, clean as a whistle, and I think that was probably the right call. A shame to see Owens on the pre-show, but hopefully he becomes more relevant once again in the weeks to come. Also worth noting that they had teased on SmackDown recently that we were going to potentially see a barroom brawl between Jeff Hardy and Sheamus, but that didn't take place on this show. And to be fair, it was never officially confirmed. Maybe we'll see that match in the near future. Now on to the first match of the main show, the SmackDown tag title match between the champions, the New Day, and the challengers, Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro. Now, of course, this was a tables match, and because of that, there were a lot of teasers of various different tables spots throughout the opening exchanges until the first real big spot of the match happened, which was Kofi leaping to the outside and getting a table thrown vertically right into his face. Looked nasty. And it was clear that New Day were at least trying to portray this tag feud as a personal one. You could argue about the effectiveness of that through the actual booking of it, but the New Day's performance here was a bit of an intense one. They were talking a lot of trash, they were acting very intense. At one stage, Kofi was even saying, "We don't like to show this side of ourselves, but you've made this happen." Eventually, we get a double table stack on the outside of the ring, and you just know that somebody is going to go through it. At first, it looks like it's going to be the New Day picking up the victory here as Kofi sets up one of his opponents for a Hurricane Rana from the corner through the tables. It would have been a ludicrous spot, but the heels reversed the momentum. And so instead, we saw Cesaro deliver the final blow of the match with a huge powerbomb to Kofi Kingston off the corner through both tables. And that was that. We have new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. And then the heels went over to the announce table and Cesaro tried to talk a bit of trash to Michael Cole, who clearly hasn't been brushing up on his improv classes because he just sat there and didn't say anything. I think he was trying to seem scared and intimidated, which is fine, but it did come across just a tiny bit awkward. A good opening match though, and we move on to the SmackDown Women's Championship match between the champion Bayley and the challenger Nikki Cross. And just before the match, it's lovely to see Nikki's supportive friends, because backstage she's getting a lovely little pep talk from not only Bliss, her tag partner, but also Kairi Sane and Asuka as well. Oh, so wholesome. And Nikki comes out like a house on fire in this one. She hits a really nice rolling DDT at one point, another DDT on the outside, kicking off the apron into sort of a tornado variation, and there's near falls all over the place, but Bayley manages to cling on. Midway through the match, Nikki catches Bayley in a crossface, but Bayley manages to get out of it and nail a Bayley to belly, but it's only good enough for two. Bayley argues with the referee and Nikki gets a good near fall from a roll-up, and it's clear that Bayley is going to have to bend the rules to put her challenger away. Luckily for her, she's got Sasha Banks at ringside. Out of sight of the referee, Sasha passes one of her boss rings to Bayley under the ropes, and Bayley turns, big gut shot to Nikki Cross right in the stomach with the weapon, and then hits the Rose Plant, her heel finisher. And that's enough for the win. Obviously, Bliss is really annoyed on the outside, but she didn't really do anything to stop it, so bad friendship there. The heels are delighted and celebrate on the ramp with all of their gold, and of course Sasha will have the chance to add to that collection later on when she takes on Asuka. Could she get it done in that match? Yeah, no, yes, no, we'll talk about it. Don't worry about it for now, but Yeah, it was a bit confusing. We'll get to that later. Next up, the planned United States title match between Apollo Crews and MVP. MVP, of course, has been declaring himself the US champion, even though he isn't officially it, because he's designed this new belt. He's been carrying it around with Bobby Lashley next to him. And then things get really weird. MVP comes out to the ring with Bobby Lashley as commentary tell us that Apollo Crews failed a physical just before the match due to an injury sustained in a beatdown from Lashley and MVP last month. Not just this week on Raw, last month. And the match is called off. Right, now obviously I don't know the situation, but you know these reports of people in WWE, people in the Performance Center testing positive for COVID-19. You have to maybe assume, and I'm not saying that I know anything obviously, but you have to maybe assume that Apollo has maybe at least been in contact with somebody, because, I mean, it's as if they had this match in mind, but then thought, well, if he's not safe to compete in it, we'll call it off on the day of the show. We'll test him then, and then we'll call... Again, this is just massive speculation on my behalf, but it does get you thinking, doesn't it? MVP declares himself the winner by forfeit, and therefore the new United States champion, but it's confusing whether this is an official title change or not, because commentary are telling us that it's surely not true, but then MVP very much seems like he is. I mean, his music plays, he lifts the belt. I don't know what's going on. And just as MVP and Lashley are leaving, and it seems like they might get cut off by somebody to have an impromptu tag match, because Lashley's in full gear as well, that's not what happens at all. I was expecting maybe like Ricochet and Cedric Alexander to come out, but nothing happens. The heels just walk to the back, and that's the match. But don't worry, because things are about to get hectic and we're about to see a lot more action, because next up it's time to talk about my favourite match ever, the eye for an eye match between Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio. Remember, the match can only be won when one of the wrestlers extracts the eye of his opponent. Rollins comes out first, he's got some pliers, he's ready to literally ply Rey Mysterio's eye out of its socket. Rey jumps in from behind, it's a distraction, the entrance is just all a fake, and Rey comes out from the back and jumps Seth, and they're both going at it straight away. Rey goes to the outside, gets a table out from under the ring, and on the table is a toolbox full of just eye extraction devices, very handily placed there, I must say. And they use a variety of weapons in various different teasing, like, oh, I'm going to stab your eye out spots, such as a kendo stick at the end of it, a steel bar at one point, but for the moment, there's minimal eye damage to be seen. But that would certainly change later on. There's quite a lot of wrestling moves in this match as well, which did confuse a lot of people who, I think, you know, we would have maybe enjoyed it if they'd gone solely for the eyes a bit more, and there was a bit more of a loose and frantic feel to this match. However, you know, they are wrestlers, and they are probably going to try and construct a wrestling match and work the stipulation around it. I don't envy Seth or Rey for having to work with this quite outrageous stipulation. But there are some wrestling moves, like Rey hits a frog splash at one point, Rollins hits a nasty looking Falcon Arrow on the apron. It's almost more of a tombstone pile driver, and that just wipes Rey out for a little while. Another highlight of this match is the trash talk between the two, because you've got Rollins stalking Rey around the ring going, I'm gonna get that eye, I'm gonna get that eye, Rey, and Rey's like, you son of a bitch. It's absolutely amazing. The weapons become a little bit more impromptu as Rollins uses a pen from the announce table, an ice pick, I think, at one point from the toolbox, maybe some sort of spike, it's like NWA in the 1980s. It's bloody beautiful, and every near spot with the eye, every near fall, if we can call it that, we've got the referee checking the eye of the guy who's been hit, being like, oh, let's just officially confirm that is still in the socket, and it is, and the match can continue. It's so unintentionally hilarious. Rey makes his fiery babyface comeback, but with the stipulation of trying to take Seth's eye out. So he breaks a kendo stick over his knee, gets a splinter out of the kendo stick, and tries to stab the eye. In fact, I think he does. And Rollins is like, oh no, and falls over the ropes, and then Rey 619s him and tries to 619 his eye out. And I would have loved it so much if a fake eye had just flown as he connected with the move across the arena, but sadly it wasn't to be. Eventually, quite predictably, they spill back to the outside of the ring and go for that spot we've seen the past few weeks on Raw, the stabbing your opponent's eye into the ring steps spot. So Rollins goes for it, but Rey scoots out and hits the stomp, a stolen finisher, as if this match needed any more bells and whistles. Then Rey tries to do it to Rollins, but then Rollins hits a low blow, and I just don't know who's going to lose their eye at this point. They've got me hooked. Oh man, I'm nearly done, I promise. Rollins regains control and grabs Ray's head and jams his face into the ring steps, and Ray screams and the ref checks and rings the bell. The match is over. Ray's eye is out of there. It's really hard to see what's going on, but some screenshots on Twitter, if you have a little search around, you'll see that in Ray's hand is an eyeball. He did have an eyeball in his hand, so yeah. Dominic is out to check on Ray because his dad's just lost an eye. Now, I don't mean to say that Dominic is a bad son, but he could maybe have intervened before Seth had actually extracted the eye. That maybe it would have been a little bit more helpful. At the same time, you've got to applaud Dominic for respecting the sanctity of the rules of this eye for an eye match and not interfering when it wasn't called for. Seth Rollins, for his part, really sells what he's done. He's really done something horrible, and he walks away and he's grabbing his stomach and he's like, oh no, and then he vomits over the ringside area. And Ray is taken to the back, clutching his eye, or former eye, and then the crowd all start going, boo, you're a bad guy, Seth, and they're banging on the plexiglass, and Rollins walks out looking all ashamed, as if he didn't know that this is how the match was going to end. We get very serious commentary before we move on to the next match, and Byron Saxton, for his part, looks absolutely devastated at what he's just seen. But there's no time to waste, because we're on to the Raw Women's Championship match between Asuka and Sasha Banks. The match that I think it's fair to say most of us were most looking forward to, in terms of like serious non-eye-based wrestling. There is an early Banks statement attempt from Sasha, but Asuka wriggles out, so Sasha just starts stomping on the hand. Remember, she has to remove the whole hand from the wrist in order to officially win the match. And a lot of this match is Sasha Banks on top, using a variety of unique submissions that we're maybe not used to seeing her use, or in fact anybody in WWE. There's a lot of very unique, some old school kind of technical stuff. It's very interesting, and it's nice to see somebody as skilled as Sasha Banks taking the match in that direction. It was cool to watch. There's some big spots in this match too. There's a lot of vicious German suplexes from Asuka on Sasha, which Sasha just sells terrifyingly, landing very close to her neck on several occasions. At one point, Sasha gets her legs trapped in the ring ropes above the second turnbuckle, and Asuka runs and nails basically like a code breaker. Sasha gets revenge on the outside a bit later with a big powerbomb into the barrier, but we have just seen an eye removed, so you know, it's not as effective maybe as it should have been. Back in the ring, they head right to the top rope, and I think Sasha actually puts her feet on the ring post and Asuka Germans her off, but Sasha backflips in midair and lands on her knees, which must have sucked, but you know, it's better than the alternative of landing really awkwardly. Then Sasha heads up top, but she kind of slips as she jumps off and falls like right onto the canvas, and I don't know if it was a botch or not. If it was a botch, they play it off really well, because commentary are like, that's from Sasha landing on her knees just before, and Sasha even is like selling the knee, and I think it was either deliberate or a botch, and if it was a botch, they saved it really well. And then the shenanigans begin, because of course Bayley is there at ringside supporting Sasha, and she distracts the referee when Asuka gets the Asuka lock locked in, and we actually see Sasha Banks tap out, but of course the ref doesn't see it. Then, moments later, Sasha goes to use one of the belts to clock Asuka, but the referee stops her, and as they're arguing, Asuka comes along, tries to miss Sasha, but she ducks, and the referee takes it full in the face. The ref is down, he can't see anything, he's just out for the rest of the match. He's not going to get back up. So Bayley takes his referee shirt off, sticks it on herself, and then counts the pinfall for Sasha and declares her the winner. And there's no music at first, no bell rings, but then Bayley heads to the timekeeper's area and basically intimidates the timekeeper into ringing the bell, and then Sasha's music plays and they are declared the winners, or Sasha I should say is declared the winner and the new Raw Women's Champion. And once again, just like with MVP and the non-match against Apollo Crews, we don't know if Sasha is officially the champion. Once again, commentary are like, well, that's not an official result, that's not true at all. But we don't know. I mean, Sasha leaves with the belt itself, so I guess we'll have to tune in tomorrow night. And this match, and the one I'm about to talk about as well, fall into the trap of this show overall, I think, which is, as I mentioned in the intro, good action, good wrestling, hampered to a certain degree by weird booking. This Sasha and Asuka match, I think, was hampered a lot by the weird finish. This next match I'm about to talk about, though, I think was really well done, even despite its odd stipulation. And the match I'm talking about is the WWE Championship match between Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler, with a secret stipulation that Ziggler is about to reveal. Now, there were some reports throughout the week building up to this that it was going to be a TLC match, but either they turned out to be false or plans were changed on the fly. Instead, Ziggler announces that the stipulation is Extreme Rules. It's an Extreme Rules match. That's not very out of the box, is it? But hang on, because that's not all. Ziggler explains that the match is Extreme Rules, but only for Dolph Ziggler. He's the only one allowed to use weapons, allowed to hit low blows and cheat, and he won't get disqualified. Meanwhile, if Drew does any of that, he will get disqualified and the belt will change hands. And if Drew decides to run away and get counted out, again, he will lose the title. So we get quite a unique setup, admittedly, for this match. It's not the most spectacular or amazing stipulation, but it is in line with Ziggler's, sneaky character, and I think it kind of works. I think they did a good job of telling that story through what was a very good match, and probably on balance, my favourite match of the night. So we've got Ziggler running away at the start of the match, looking for weapons under the ring, and Drew stopping him whenever he can. Ziggler sets up a table, Drew goes to hit a suplex, but realises that he's going to land him on the table and has to rotate in midair and just suplex him onto the floor. It's well done, and there were several little moments like this that reminded us what was going on. We get certain spots like Ziggler reversing the momentum of the match with just the most blatant of low blows. We've not seen a low blow like this since Shinsuke Nakamura's heyday as the nut-busting heel that he was a couple of years ago. We also get Drew going for the Claymore, but Ziggler nullifying that by grabbing a chair and just swinging it into his standing leg. We also get what I think was my spot of the entire night, really, which is when Ziggler lays Drew over a table on the outside, heads up top, and just hits an insane elbow drop off the ring post through the table, and Drew bravely manages to just beat the 10 count and get back into the ring. But that spot was very impressive from Dolph Ziggler, and to be fair, he really did work his arse off in this match, as he so often does. Towards the end, Ziggler also hits what looked like a rock bottom onto a chair for a near fall, which I think may have been a bit of an homage to The Rock, who had some very nice things to say about Dolph this week on social media, but it doesn't help him win the match because he tunes up the band looking for sweet chin music, and as he, sides his way across the ring, he runs straight into a Claymore, 1, 2, 3, and Drew McIntyre is still, and rightly so, the WWE Champion. And finally, God help us all, it's time to talk about the main event of the night, the Swamp Fight between Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt. Of course, Braun is the Universal Champion, but this was non-title. It wasn't really a match even. It was one of those cinematic matches without pinfalls and that sort of thing. It was most in line, I think, with the Firefly Funhouse match between Bray and Cena at WrestleMania, but I honestly don't think it was quite as effective. So we start with Braun driving into the swamp and getting out of his car, and there's Bray in his rocking chair, and he's like, welcome home, and then the lights go out, the lights of the outdoors go out, and when they come back up, Bray is gone, and Braun is livid, and he picks up the rocking chair and smashes it and stalks off into the swamp, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna get real right now. Braun then runs into a few kind of hillbilly henchmen who he fights off after a little bit of work, and then gets nailed in the back with a shovel, and I'm thinking, oh, there's Bray, there he is, and Braun looks up at his attacker, and it's Braun. It's him, but old him in his old Wyatt family attire with the sheep mask, and I'm just like, what? Braun then wakes up chained to a chair in a room. I hope it's not a room in the Wyatt family compound, because obviously Randy Orton burned that down in 2017, and continuity is very, very important. But no, it seems like some kind of outdoor shack, sort of like a garage area in the swamp. So I can forgive that. I don't think it was actually the burned down compound. Bray then cuts a promo on Braun saying he's proud of him for all the success he's achieved since leaving the Wyatt family, but he did borrow that success from Bray Wyatt. And also he says that we're not enemies, and he tries to convince Braun to join him, and Braun refuses. And I've just summarized there the gist of this basically promo in the middle of the match. Now I summarized that in just a few seconds, but that's not accurate because this monologue went on for quite some time. So Bray's like, right, well, you won't join me, here we go then. And he gestures to the entrance, and here comes a shadowy figure in a veil. I think it's meant to be Sister Abigail. They've brought a serpent along, and it bites Braun, and then everything blacks out once again. Braun wakes up back in the original area when he got hit with the shovel, implying that maybe what we've seen is all a dream. He gets to his feet, fights off a few more henchmen, including my favourite person in this entire match, a very tall stuntman in a blatant, fireproof jumpsuit, because Right, first of all, he was so tall. I think he was taller than Braun Strowman, which is incredible in itself. He gets knocked down by Braun, rolls into the campfire, and it just sets his suit ablaze, and he runs off into the forest. And I want that man to be the next Universal Champion, please. Braun then recovers a little bit, and he sees Sister Abigail once again, and she says, "Come on, Braun, come home." And he's like, "I recognise that voice." And I'm like, "I recognise that voice too, who is it?" And she takes off the veil, and it's Alexa Bliss. Then we get flashbacks to the whole mixed tag tournament, where Alexa and Braun were partners, and there was a bit of a weird teased romance angle that never quite ended. And Braun's all like, "Oh no," and Alexa's all like, "Yeah, you wanted to be with me, come home and rejoin us," and all this. It's so weird. But before long, Bray is back, and he goes right for Braun's eyes, which we've had quite enough of tonight. And Braun clearly agrees as well, because he chokeslams Bray into a boat, and Bray is unconscious, and the boat drives off of its own accord. And Braun's like, "Well, that's done, that's over." But as he watches, the boat turns round and comes back, and there's no one inside, and he's disappeared. But he's not, because Bray's right behind him and starts beating him down with an oar and trying to drown him in the lake, and it's getting hot and heavy. But Braun survives the attack, the attempted murder really, and boots Bray off a jetty into the water, and Bray disappears beneath the surface, and it looks like it's all over. In fact, Braun even says, "It's over." And then the signature appears at the bottom of the screen, and it appears like, yes, legit, this is the end of the show, but it's a bloody NXT Tommaso Ciampa fakie, and the signature disappears, and Bray like lurches back out the water and grabs Braun and drags him in. And then the water turns red, and the Fiend emerges. We've finally seen the Fiend. He's got the mask on. The Fiend laughs into the camera, says, "Let me in," and everything goes to black. And that's how Extreme Rules ended. So yeah, that was Extreme Rules, a show where lots of stuff happened. There was, an eye got taken out, there was a man on fire, and we don't know who any of the champions are anymore. So quite a lot of stuff happened, I think you'll agree. Thank you very much for watching this video. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Do let me know what you thought of Extreme Rules in that comment section down below. Thanks once again. Stay safe out there, keep yourselves positive, and I'll see you very soon.